You were expecting Brother Joe up here this morning, and he was too. As you were aware, he was going to be preaching on the Great White Throne Judgment this morning, and he called me this morning, and he was just so sick he knew he couldn't make it over here. So he asked me to cover this morning for him. Since he was sick, he said he's going back to bed. So anyway, we'll see how today works out. Amen. Be instant, in season and out of season, and this was out of season. Amen. But anyway, he did want me to tell you that he will be sharing the message on the Great White Throne Judgment in a Wednesday night very soon. So those that wanted to hear that last part of that prophecy series would be able to hear that and not miss out. So he'll be announcing when that Wednesday night will be, and you'll be able to catch that. Well, the guy wanted a little more confidence in his life. He just felt like everybody was running over him. So he thought, I'm going to take one of these assertive classes. So he did. He went to class and he learned all of this assertion. Well, he didn't really learn it right because he took it a little too far. After the class, he got home, threw open the door and told his wife, listen, you're going to cook my favorite meals every day. You're going to serve me here on my chair. You're going to rub my feet every night. You're going to go get my slippers and my newspaper. And then tonight, guess who's going to run my bath water and who's going to comb my hair when I'm done? She looked over at him and said, the funeral director. That was not the response he was looking for. And when God called Moses to do the task he wanted him to do, it wasn't the response that he wanted either. And so today we're going to be looking at how not to respond to God's call. Not how to respond, but how not to respond to His call. Because we can see that in the life of Moses. He didn't do it the way it should have been done. Matter of fact, he did it reluctantly. Let's look at the passage today that we're going to focus in on, Exodus 3:1. Now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and says, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. Matter of fact, a lot of people, God does call. Your name, and you said, yes, Lord, here is, and you call somebody else's name to take your place. But see, God's not looking for your place to be taken. He's calling you and me specifically by name. And so we need to see how we need to respond. A couple of notes before we look at how not to respond. First of all, let's look at, to hear God's call, you need to surrender yours. A lot of people said, I wish I could hear the voice of God. Oh, He's speaking all the time. It's just we don't hear it. And in order to hear it, you've got to surrender yours. You see, Moses was about his business. That passage says Moses was pasturing the flock. And later on in that verse, he said he was leading the flock. His business, his occupation, his livelihood, his day-to-day operations, his life was doing shepherding. That's fine. We're busy in life. We got our houses, we got our jobs, we got our children, we got business, we got maintenance, we got a lot going on. And that's okay. Moses had a lot going on. But in order to hear God's voice, he was going to have to surrender that for at least a moment. To say, this is not what's important, even though it has its importance. It's not as important as hearing the voice of God. Important, but not as important as hearing God's voice, because He didn't call him until he turned aside. Do you know, I don't believe he had ever heard the voice of God until he turned aside. Exodus says, and Moses said, I must turn aside. I got all these sheep to handle, but I'm going to turn from these sheep for a moment and see this marvelous sight. Why this bush is not burned up. And the Lord saw him saw that he turned aside. He left those sheep. And then God called him. A lot of people said, if only I could hear the voice of God. I keep hearing all these people say, I heard from God, and God led me this, and God led me that. Why doesn't God speak to me? God never spoke his name until he turned aside. He said, these sheep, for right now, are not my priority. This thing that I see, this sight, I don't know what it's all about, but I've got to turn from my daily business, my daily operations, and I've got to focus on this. I don't know what it's about. I don't understand it fully, but I'm going to go check it out. Matter of fact, I like what Matthew Henry says. He says, things revealed belong to us, and we ought diligently inquire into them. See, a lot of people don't hear from God because you're never inquisitive enough to really be searching what He's saying. You see, my TV only comes on to the channel that I tune it. My radio only goes out and finds the radio station of which I tune it. Radio waves are all over the sky. TV waves are all over the sky. I mean, if you could see it, it would just be phenomenal, all the radio waves and TV waves that are crossing. I know a lot of you say, well, I got cable, it comes through a wire. I'm talking about regular TV, antenna. Work with me here, okay? And all these waves and cell phone waves and whatever, they're all tuned in to one thing, and that's the station, the radio station, or your phone number. And if you don't have the phone number right, the radio station tuned in right, the TV station tuned in right, you will not pick up the signal, no matter how hard you try. You say, nobody calls me on my phone. Does anybody know your number? Have they called your number? Nothing comes on my TV. Do you have it on a station that exists? I can't hear anything on the radio. Do you have it on a dial that there's a station? And a lot of people complain they can't hear from God. God was speaking the whole time, but Moses, he waited for Moses to turn aside from his daily operations to hear the voice of God. And you know what? You know where God spoke? He spoke out of a bush. It wasn't a stately oak tree. It wasn't a tall, stately pine tree. God chose to speak out of an old bush. This is going to be important later on when he talks to Moses, but think about it. God didn't use anything really elaborate beside a bush not burning up, but the bush itself was just a bush. Remember we said before, when God told the children of Israel how to be saved from the Passover when the death angel passed over. Remember, he told them to dip the blood in hyssop. It was just an old bush. Nothing fancy about it. Just an old bush. See, God, it's not what He chooses, it's how He uses that makes the difference. And so let's look at some of the excuses that we shouldn't use. First of all, it's the inadequacy excuse. Here's Moses' first word, but. How many Christians have said that? God wants to use you here. Come serve here. You need to be used here. And our very first word out of our mouth to God is but. And same with Moses. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, certainly, I will be with you, and this shall be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God at this mountain. Who am I? Isn't that the call of most people? Who am I? For God to use me to do such a great task. And Moses made that statement as if to say, look, I'm not qualified. You know what I believe he was saying? I got issues. I got issues. I know none of y'all have issues, but some of us have issues. You can't use me. I've got issues. I've got some inadequacies. I haven't arrived yet. Give me time. Give me a few more years. Let me get through college. Let me learn a little bit more. Let me do a little bit more. And for this task, that wasn't appropriate. Do you know, if you ask most people, why did God rescue the children out of Egypt and send them out of bondage? You know what most people would probably say? So they wouldn't be slaves anymore. Duh. I mean, so they wouldn't be in bondage anymore. Duh. I mean, that's the answer. You know, if you ask most people, why did God save you? Many people would answer this way: so I wouldn't go to hell, so I wouldn't be punished for my sins. And people miss both stories completely, because that's not the right answer for either one of the two. You know, when it says there, they came, look at all of the passages. This is a few of the passages that God says why He's sending them out. That they may serve me, 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 that they may serve the Lord their God. Serve the Lord your God. Exodus. Therefore, our livestock, they were telling the Lord, too shall go with us. Not a hoof shall be left behind, for we shall take some of them to serve the Lord our God. And until we arrive there, we ourselves do not know what we shall, with what we shall serve the Lord. We're taking all this stuff. We don't know what we're doing. We know one thing we're going to do. We're going to serve the Lord. And then in Exodus, and go, Pharaoh said, and worship the Lord as you have said. Is that enough passages? Do you think the Lord was making it very clear why He was letting them go? Not to just be free. Not to just be out of bondage. Not to have to be a slave the rest of your life. He gave them the reason why that He was setting them free. Go and serve. You've been serving the Egyptians, but now you're going to serve me. A lot of people think in heaven you're going to be doing a harp. I have not seen that harp playing thing in any of the Bible. In heaven, you know what you're going to be doing? Hopefully what you're doing now, serving the Lord. What does that all entail? I don't know what all that's going to entail. God knows what all that means, but we will be serving Him, I believe, in some capacity. You can see all these passages that it's clear why God even let them go. And you go back to the analogy about salvation. Why are you saved? So I don't go to hell? No, same reason that He let them go. So you can serve. Yes, serving by telling people, serving by worshiping. I mean, there's a lot of ways to serve, but we were saved to serve the Lord, to worship God. And then comes another excuse, the irrelevancy excuse. God's just irrelevant. Exodus 3:13, then Moses said to God, behold, I am going to the sons of Israel, and I will say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me. Now they may say to me, what is His name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And He said, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you. I am. Matter of fact, what He's saying here is really more than what most people do. They're just saying, well, He's only asking His name. What's the big deal? I like how MacArthur comments on this. He says, asking what meant they sought relevancy of the name to their circumstances. Who would have sought after title, name, and identity? When what inquired to the character, quality, or essence of a person. In other words, how relevant is this God to our life? And you know what? I believe this is the key ingredient to most people missing Christianity, is its relevance. That's why people don't want to do or serve the Lord. They don't even see that that's relevant. Why get saved? Is that relevant? Why surrender? Is that relevant? Why serve? Is that really relevant? Do you know how many people in America own a cell phone today? 91%. Do you know how many people are in church this morning? 17%. Why? Relevance. They say it's relevant for me to spend my hard-earned money on a little device I can put up to my ear and talk with people. It's relevant. But, on the other hand, they say, for me to take my time, effort, money, energy to come to a building to serve a God I can't see, why is that relevant? What does that do for me? It's irrelevant. That's how most people's mentality is. They can't see the relevance in serving and loving and being saved. They don't get the connection. That's the cry that God's wanting. You know, that's why people don't want to obey the Lord. That's why people won't surrender to the Lord. They say, look, why should I give up time and energy? It's just not relevant. I mean, what's it going to do for me? I mean, it's not going to bring me any money. I mean, why? And then you start telling them, well, your rewards later. That's later on. That's not relevant today. Yeah, but you're doing it to love God. Yeah, but I'm saved anyway. I'm still going. And they have all these excuses of why hearing God's call is not relevant. And it's the same way true with, he said, what's your name? These people are going to want to know how relevant you are to their circumstances. And obviously people didn't think you were. You know, God is plenty relevant. Look what the passage says. First of all, He's pre-knowledge. He gives us many things. First of all, He gives us pre-knowledge planning. He's already told them what's going to happen in the future. I'm going to bring you out of the affliction of Egypt. And then He says, to a land flowing of milk and honey. I'm already telling you what I'm going to do in the future. Even before you go, I'm already telling you I'm going to free you up. You're going to be out of affliction. And not only that, I'm going to take you out of this land and give you even a better land. A land flowing of milk and honey. And how did God know all that? Because God knows the future. Do you know how much just you knowing a little bit of the future every day would mean to you? Just think of every decision you make every day. All you'd have to do is go in your mind, okay, let me go into tomorrow, the next day, next week, next year. Aha. And you come back. Just think stocks. Okay, I'm going to go 3 years in advance. Ooh, now let me go back to here and then buy all those stocks. Now let me think about this decision. How is this decision going to be in 10 more years? I'm not going to make that one. Let me try this one. Do you think if God just gave you the ability to know the future? I mean, that right there would make you the wealthiest man or woman or child on the planet. It'd make you healthier, wealthier, wiser. I mean, God, look at all the things you could do if you just had the ability to know the future. Matter of fact, that's all you need to know to make a right decision, isn't it? Is to know what the future would hold in that decision, if it'd be a good one or a bad one. And here God's saying, look, I'm relevant. First of all, I can lead you because I already know the future. Ask me what to do in that situation. Why? Because I already know the future. See, it's rigged with God. He can give you the answer because He already knows what's going to turn out. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And then God gives power. He said, look, don't worry about me being relevant. I am relevant. I can stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all my miracles. That's why He's relevant. He knows the future and can help guide me. He's powerful. And He gives me favor with people. And I will grant this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. You know what we need in life? Is for God to cause other people to show favor upon us. I don't know if I'm going to get this loan. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go to this agency. Man, these people are in great authority. I don't know if they're going to rule in my favor. God says, you let me guide your life and I'll cause them to show favor upon you. Is that relevant? Absolutely. To know the future, to have God's power on your side, and to have God cause people to show favor upon you. And of course the last one, His provision. You will not go empty-handed. He went on to tell them, I'm going to let the Egyptians just bless you all kind of ways. They're going to be giving you all kind of gold. They're going to be giving you all kind of provision. Is God relevant? Absolutely. If you respond to His call, look what all that He's going to provide for you. And then there's the interference excuse. The interference excuse. Oops. Can you go back on that one, Noah? Is it? Okay, there you go. It says, Then Moses said, What if they will not believe me or listen to what I say? For they may say, The Lord has not appeared to you. It's a may. See, if you haven't responded to God's call, yes, you may have responded to God's call to salvation, but have you responded to His call to service? You may be saying, well, if I do that, this may happen, or that may happen, or this may happen. That's what Moses is saying. Well, there may be some interference. No, there not may be some interference. There will be some interference. You say, but there may be failure. No, there may not be failure. There will be some failures. So whatever excuse we give the Lord by saying, there may be, people may say stuff about me, they may be scoffers, I may not even want to do it. I may get tired of doing it. The devil's going to do it. The world, well, there's always interference. Do you know all the guys or ladies that like to watch sports? Do you know how boring those sports would be if only one team showed up? I mean, just think you're watching the Texans. Well, they still may lose. I don't know, but anyway, you know. But if the other team just didn't even show up, why? In order to have a game, you have to have opposition, right? You can't show what you can do. In other words, football team goes there. Look how well we pass. Look how well we catch. Look how fast we run. Well, yeah, there's nobody on the other side. Of course, you're doing well. To make a game, you have to have opposition so that you can prove, at least in a game, how skillful, powerful, and whatever else you are as a team. That's not with us. We have to have opposition so we can show how powerful our God is. With no opposition, we couldn't say, look how powerful God is. He did this, and He overcame this, and He did this. When I responded to His call, He did all of these things. It wasn't me, it was Him. And then God gave Moses these signs. You know, the staff sign, the leprosy sign, the future sign. He gave him all these signs to reaffirm to him, I am with you, I'll take care of this. So Moses said, he said, throw down your staff, and he did. And it turned to a serpent, and then he picked it back up, and it was a staff. Then his hand, he said, have your hand, it turned leprous. He put it in his coat, and he brought it back out, and it was back to normal. And then he said, even in the future, I'm going to have you do this in Egypt. You'll pour Nile water on the ground, and it'll become blood. He was reaffirming to him, I've called you. God reaffirms to us, He has called us. You say, I hadn't heard the call. Well, turn the radio station to the right dial. Turn the frequency to the right dial, because He is calling all of us. And then the last one is His inability excuse. Never given this one, have you? The inability excuse? I just don't have any abilities. I just can't serve the Lord. I just don't have what it takes. Of course, He's already given all these other excuses why He couldn't do it. And none of those really held water. Now He's going to try one more. Then Moses said to the Lord, Please, Lord, I've never been eloquent, neither recently nor in time past, nor since you have spoken to your servant, for I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. Lord, I've never been a good speaker now, or even in my past, I've just never been. I just never been able to speak well. My tongue, it's slow. I think of the words, but I can't get them out quick enough on my tongue. I'm just not a good speaker. And of course, God would reply, I forgot about that. I didn't see that on your resume. I got your resume and I looked it over. I missed that part. No. God didn't miss anything. He's telling God, the creator of the world, the creator of him, that he is not a good speaker, that God has made a mistake in calling him to service. You got to have somebody else. It can't be me, because you would definitely call somebody that was a good speaker. You ask most people when they're going to stand before the Lord, and we all will, at not the great white throne judgment that Joe was going to preach on this morning, but at the Bema judgment. And a lot of people will say this: I'm not a good this, and I'm not a good that, and I can't do this, and I couldn't have done that, and Lord, you'll understand. And God will tell you, that's how I made you, to not be able to do that, and not be able to do this, and not be able to do this, and not be able to do this. I made you that way. I'm the one who did it. And so here he tries to give him this excuse, as if God didn't even know. And of course, the Lord said to him, who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute, or deaf, or seeing, or blind? Is it I, the Lord? Now then go, and I, even I, will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to say. God's telling him, who made man's mouth? Who made people born deaf? Who made people born blind? Who made people good speakers and who made people bad speakers? Was it not God? In His infinite wisdom, He did that. In His infinite knowledge, He did that. He made them be able to speak in front of people and not speak in front of people. I know driving somewhere, Hannah and I were having a conversation, and we were talking about her speaking in front of some fashion, and she said, well, Dad, I can't do that. You don't understand, Dad. I am not like you. And I said, no, you're exactly like me. Because that's exactly how I was. I would get so nervous just being a group of people. I remember one time my parents sent me down to Vacation Bible School. I stood in line to go in the church. I got so nervous that I was going to have to talk to somebody. I ran back home. You say, why on earth would God call you to preach and to speak? I don't know. He just uses dumb bushes. He just picks, you can't go up to God and say, well, God, I can't do this. I said, I made you to not be able to do this so that I can get glory. I will use what you can't do, because if you could do it, you'd get all the glory. Say, look what I did. And you can't do that, because you can only say, look what God did. And here he is, Moses, trying to have this argument, this discussion with God to say, look, I'm not able to do this. This doesn't work for me. God's had enough. He's taken all these other excuses, one by one, by one, by one. But now He's had enough. There is a time when God's had enough from all of us in our excuses. Because now He gets down to the nitty-gritty and says in verse 12, now then go! Go! I've heard you. I've answered your questions. I've told you you've had all these excuses. I've explained them one by one. I've told you I'm going to take care of it. I told you I made your mouth. I told you I'm going to control your mouth. I'm going to give you the ability. I'm going to take care of everything. He's hit every excuse and answered one by one by one. Now He's done. And He says, go. Go do what I've called you to do. And so now you think, okay, now Moses is ready to go. He starts off with that same word he started out with in chapter 3 when God first called him. But. God allowed that first but He's not going to allow this one. And He said, please, Lord, now send the message by whomever you will. You know what He was saying there? Use anybody else but me. There's plenty of people in the church, God. There's plenty of people to get stuff done in the church. Call one of them, but don't call me. That's what He was saying. Call anybody but me. And then the anger of the Lord burned. You don't want the anger of the Lord to burn against you. Moses and said, Is there not your brother Aaron the Levite? I know that he speaks fluently. He is an excellent speaker. Now, when you read this passage, you probably have thought like I thought, and like Moses probably thought, then why didn't you call him to start with? I mean, you knew he's got a great voice. I got a terrible voice. This is a speaking job, not a serving job with your hands. So why didn't you call him to start with? Because God wanted to call Moses. And you can't argue with God what God's calling you to do. Because He's very likely will call you to do something you can't do, which He will, so that He can do it through you and get glory. That's what He longs to do. But we have this mentality like I'm sure the children of Israel. God got us out of Egypt and going to get it out of Egypt just so we can be happy and just be free. God saved me so I could just be free. No. God saved you like He did with these people so you can go out of Egypt and serve Him and hear the call. And so He's saying, don't use me. Use Aaron. You know, that's why a lot of God's work and a lot of God's call get unheard. Because people are saying, here, my Lord, send somebody else at that church. God said, I'm not calling somebody else. I'm calling you. And for you and I, one of these excuses is going to be the final straw in the sense that God's going to turn and it's going to stir up His anger. Now, there's some communication. I think, Lord, what about this? And Lord, I'm not sure. Yes, there can be some communique. But eventually God said, this is what I've called you to do. This is what I want you to do to serve me. You know what Moses was saying? I'm not going to do it to either you change the circumstance or change me. That's what he was really saying. You're either going to change these circumstances or you have to change me. You have to show that you're going to zap me with some speaking ability right fast. God's not waiting to do that. God wants to use him now. You know, 40 years in Pharaoh's court, that education, plus 40 years in the wilderness dealing with an animal that's a lot like God's people, sheep. God figured that that was sufficient enough to go lead his people. Matter of fact, God in his sovereignty led Moses to those two positions. Education in Egypt and leading sheep of his father-in-law. So that in that he was prepared to do what God asked him to do, whether he could speak well or not. All of those repetitions in Egypt, to go and serve me, 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 to go and serve me. You know, anytime God repeats something that often, I think he's trying to really tell us something. You are saved to worship and serve me. Will we? What is more important than your call? Some may say, well, it's my career. You know that's going to be left here on earth, don't you? Matter of fact, there won't be an earth after the millennium. It's going to be burned up anyway. So this earth that we're sitting on won't even be here. It's everything on it and in it and itself will be consumed by fire. Let's see. Well, my marriage, yes, your marriage is very, very, very important to God. But you realize there's no marriage and giving in marriage in heaven. Well, let's see. Well, you can give whatever excuse you are or have. But getting saved and hearing God, well, first of all, you heard God's call to be saved or you wouldn't be saved. You realize that? God draws. You say, I came to God. That's because He called you. And you responded. It wasn't you were out there looking for Him. He called your name. And you turned aside from what you were doing. And you went and you received Christ as your Lord and Savior. Because you heard the call. Now, after you were saved, have you heard the call to service? Have you heard the call to stop doing that behavior that's causing Him to be grieved? Have you heard the call to start doing what He's asked you to start doing? So that you won't be able to give God an excuse. You'll just be able to say what God wanted Moses to say is, okay, God, let's go. Because that's what He said at that last verse. He said, go. You say, I don't know what to do. Well, ask God. Some people are prayer warriors, so pray for the people. Some people are led to serve in children's ministries. Some people are led to serve in this area. Some people are encouragers. Some people, they find their spiritual gifts and they use them. God's able to tell each person that He saved how He wants them to serve. He did that with Moses. You say, yeah, but that was probably audibly. Well, God still speaks to us, even though it may not be in an audible voice. If He did it for Moses, He's not a respecter of persons. He does it for every single believer. What's more important than your calling? Because when we stand before God, that'll be very important. With every head bowed and every eye closed as you stand to your feet,